Hi, everyone. Bob Dietrich here with another edition of the ADHD Toolbox. And it's my honor to have Jeff Copper here with us today. Jeff is running his own organization called Dig Coaching Practice, LLC. He is, Jeff, where are you located in the United States?
Tampa, Florida.
Awesome. Well, welcome to our show. You've got tons going on and very popular. A lot of people follow you. Tell us what Dig Coaching is and what you do with Dig Coaching.
I fashion myself as an attention coach because I think that's really what we do. Just like an athletic coach, the only difference is Bob, only you can witness what goes on inside of your head. I can't see it, and you can't see what goes on inside of my head. So metaphorically, it's like I'm a blind basketball coach. I can't see anything. All I can do is ask questions to help you figure it out. That's really kind of what I do. So I say I'm an attention coach, but I specialize in adults that have ADHD because they have more challenging attention problems and they think a little bit differently. And because of my challenges, I've always done a little bit think stuff differently. So what I do is I really coach people to help them see the world in a way that really makes some sense for them so that they can move forward in life.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, today we're going to be talking specifically about mindset and mindset around ADHD. What mindset are you bringing into ADHD? Because part of our mission is to change the narrative around it and not focus so much on the ADHD disorder, right? The disorder, and focus more on what's the potential upside and really helping people embrace this ADHD so they can manage it and get through to that brilliant genius side of that brain. And so we're going to talk with Jeff about that. Jeff, can you give us maybe a little history going in, and where should we start with this discussion with mindset? Where is it now?
Well, let's start with what you're trying to do. You said we're trying to change the narrative around it. Mm-hmm. We're trying to change the narrative around it. I call mindset, it's how your mind is set up to think. What you guys are doing is you want to walk in and you want to help people change to set up their mind to think about ADHD differently. That's what this is all about. This is what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. What I'm here today to talk about is, like a lot of your other guests are here to talk about what to pay attention to and what it looks like. What I'd like to talk about is there's a process that you go through, in my opinion, to get from where you are, how your mind is set up now, to actually change your mind to set up differently. I'd like people to understand what that process is, because the more you understand it, you can manage it, not fight it or shortcut. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to begin, for those that follow me or check out my website, I'm all about the aha. Mm-hmm. And aha is the sudden comprehension that takes place when you pay attention to something differently. It's the I get it, the eureka, aha. It's when everything falls into place and everything makes some sense.
Right.
Okay. That's a thing. What we're talking about here is mindset, and that's collectively how your mind is set up to think. So think of mindset as like science. Mm-hmm. Okay. Many hundreds of years ago, our mind was set up to think that the earth was the center of the universe. Galileo came in and said, nope, it's not. We rotate around the sun. And this huge intellectual conflict came up in the scientific community. If you don't mind, there's some verbiage that I think really helps describe this I want to read so we can kind of hang our hat on it. Sure. And that is, unlike an insight or an aha, a change in mindset doesn't happen overnight. Think of mindsets as mental models or your version of science. They all have anomalies that can't be explained, that are brushed aside as acceptable levels of error. It's when enough of these anomalies occur that can't be explained by the adopted mindset that the existing mindset is thrown into crisis. So when Galileo was like, wait a second, there's some things that can't be explained by us being the center of the universe. And he pushed that, it threw it into turmoil and chaos because the existing thought that we are the center of the universe couldn't explain that.
Right.
Setting up your mind to think differently doesn't take place without significant anxiety or conflict. The shifts take time during an explosive intellectual battle necessary to disprove the old model and for the ego to accept the new one. So back in those days, it was an explosive conversation. They threw Galileo in jail before really they got around and they accepted the new, wait a second, we're not the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. Now, what's important is many people can't make these shifts because of the dependencies on the old theories. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, particularly when it comes to Dr. Barkley, which I'm a huge fan. So some people will resist it and they'll never make that leap and actually adopt something that could explain those anomalies. Does this make sense so far?
Yep, absolutely.
And so you're trying to rewrite the narrative. And so people are you're going to go through some anxiety and explosive intellectual battle for you to begin to adopt some of these. If you look out at any experts out there that I know of, and you've got a lot of great people that I know, they're coming, Alan Brown, Caroline McGuire, Ned Hollowell, Dr. Barkley, all of them got here by changing the way they conceptually thought of ADHD. In other words, they changed the narrative, which is this process. And what I'd like people to do is embrace this as you're going to go through some challenges, because you got to let go of how society's telling you to do this in order to make that leap. Make sense so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of Dr. Russell Barkley's, and I personally think that he's in the middle of changing the science and the mindset around it, because I saw him speak the first time in 2011 on his executive functioning deficit disorder model. And at the time, he went through 7 points that he identified that we know ADHD is in executive functioning. It's in the prefrontal cortex. That's where it is. The problem with it is if you took any executive functioning test, it didn't show up as an impairment.
Mm-hmm.
Either it's not an executive functioning or the tests were wrong. Well, the problem was there was no unified definition of what executive function was, a dog's breakfast of definitions. So Dr. Barkley, what he did is he went out there, and all the experts agreed that self-regulation is a major issue with regard to executive functioning. That we have a great definition on. Everybody agreed to. It's direction and action back on yourself to change your behavior to change the future. It's a future-directed act. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
Once he came up with that definition, we now can define what is and is not an executive functioning. And in that, ADHD is a big issue. So when you begin to hear impulsivity, distractibility, directing attention back on yourself, directing an action back on yourself to inhibit your attention going off somebody to change the future. He started preaching this for a really long time, and it's changed the way that I coach, because ADHD at the end of the day is a self-regulation, the inability to pause and override your automatic brain that's chasing dopamine or fight, flight, or freeze or whatever. It's funny, I actually met with him 2 years ago and talked about something else, and his theories, he said it's going to take a generation for everybody to adopt his theories, because they're fighting all the people making the tests. It's not showing up as impairment. That's their livelihood. They're taking it kicking and screaming. They don't really want to make that switch. So there's turmoil right now when you go out there on what ADHD, is it a deficit of attention or is it a self-regulation issue? I really see it as a self-regulation issue. And if you begin to think of it like that,
Mm-hmm.
it helps us rewrite that narrative, because ADHD, if it's a self-regulation issue, you have to regulate your attention, your emotions. I say bodily movement. Dr. Barkley doesn't, but he's a smart guy. We're going to go with him. But if you have it from an attention issue, there's things that you can engage your attention issue you're into, and the issue's not paying attention to it. It's actually stopping. Like, think about this. Bob, if a kid with ADHD can play computer games all weekend, is that an attention issue?
Nope.
He's having a hard time disengaging his attention to go to bed or go do his homework. Or that adult that gets on the computer at 9 o'clock at night and all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not a deficit of attention. That's a self-regulation issue.
Mm-hmm.
So this new theory that he's come to town with now begins to explain all those anomalies that the deficit of attention model does not.
Mm-hmm.
Just making some sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and bear with me a second.
Sure.
So on a macro level, I'm a big fan of his, because he's rewriting that narrative, and his new model explains what the other model didn't. Now, practically what you're here today to do is help everybody rewrite their narratives. And all of you, as you go through this,
Mm-hmm.
you've been programmed to think a certain way, and to be able to let go and actually begin to see what people with ADHD always pay attention to, and how they have a hard time stopping. And sometimes the things where they can kind of excel, it's kind of hard to believe that happens, but you have to let go of it. You also have to begin to let go of, but they are just going to have to do these things in everyday society. I coach it every day. We want to understand who you are and what happens. We want to begin to minimize anything that you have a hard time paying attention with, or we want to find compensatory strategies to minimize some of that stuff. And we want to accent everything that goes right. And if you listen to any book out there, they say, you're trying to help somebody with ADHD, find something they're interested in, throw all your money at it. Because if they've got that interest and they can make some, you want to set them up in that career for them to thrive in that.
Mm-hmm.
And take a look at Rick Green of Totally ADD. He writes skit comedy. His wife, Ava Green, she takes care of all the back office. He does what he does because he's really good at it. Alan Brown's coming on this. Alan has been a mastermind at how to offload things on some other people and really work that. Ned Hallowell, same thing. They've created the environments around them so that they can do what they're good at and let go of what they think they should do. Again, rewriting the narrative. So again, let me stop and give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on this.
Well, what I really like and what's occurring to me is that when people with ADHD enjoy something and they engage, and when they don't enjoy it, they disengage more so than neurotypical people. And that's kind of a theme that's come through, is that this engagement, this enjoyability, this making things fun and making things interesting makes it more enjoyable. And I know for myself, with public speaking, for example, public speaking for a lot of people is not an enjoyable process, but I've been doing it for 20 years through Toastmasters. Yep. And it has become an enjoyable process because it's been a social gathering, and it's, we've made it into something that is fun and engaging. Yep. And I think part of what we're saying here is when we can not only do things that we're good at, but also do things that we enjoy, and if we don't enjoy them, make them fun.
Yep.
So that's part of reading between the lines here.
It really is. Now I want to take this down a little bit more street levels. We're starting to work our way down this kind of concept. Mm-hmm. I did an interview with Dr. Russell Barkley on Attention Talk Radio a couple years ago called Attention Talk. If you Google Attention Talk Radio GPS, it was a great thing because we were talking about working memory and his side of the world, and we kind of transitioned through. I have some attention exercise, and we got to the end. I was talking about the practical application of this, and we got to the end of the interview, and we both kind of concluded that paper's high tech for people with those with ADHD for mm-hmm. working memory problems. Now, this is one thing that I Bob, every once in a while you say something comes out of your mouth, you go, that's really, really good stuff. Well, this is one that came out of my mouth, and I hope everybody who's watching this writes this down. It is convenient for society. Again, it's convenient for society if you do it their way. And in rewriting the narrative for the people that are watching, Bob, is you don't have to do it their way. They're bullying you because it's easy for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're bullying you because they want you to do the work. They're lazy, if you will. I don't like that word, but needless to say. And so part of this narrative is I was earlier today, I was on another interview. We were talking about working memory and the need to put it to paper. And I was going through the reasons from a working memory perspective and kind of a self-regulation of why that really took place. And I had lots of ideas, and there was lots of light bulbs that were going off left and right because we're going to technology and you're not supposed to use paper. Why not? There's nothing wrong with using paper, particularly if it's productive for you. So sometimes you have to rewrite that narrative on how you think you are, or you're not supposed to do that. What I do with people is I try to help them. If the paper works and you're very efficient, let's go with it. Let's not get caught up in that belief system and that narrative or the current mindset that you need to do it this way. Because again, the mindset out there is you need to go green. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's because it's convenient for everybody else for you to go green because they push it off on you. Mm-hmm. Making a little bit of sense. And so if you're going to adopt that mindset, well, no, we want to rewrite the AD thing. You're like, no, it's easier for me if I use paper. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to advocate for myself and stand up for yourself to do it. And sometimes you actually have to understand ADD and you need to understand yourself and that it works in order for you to have the right mindset. So you can push back to people and say, no, this is the way I do it. The heck with you. Make sense?
Yeah, and that's a strong suit of people with ADHD as well, is their ability to be creative and think differently than other people. And when you start to manage, what I've learned in interviewing, over 40 experts now, and when you manage ADHD, you have access to that, you have more access to that creative genius side.
So a few other examples of this is that visualize the parent of the ADHD kid who is a junior or senior in high school. Mm-hmm. Most of the parents' mindset is this kid needs to go to college. Mm-hmm. That's the mindset. A lot of anxiety for them to think about that their kid's not going to go to college. Mm-hmm. Well, we know because of working memory issues, people with ADHD tend to be better, more blue collar stuff that they can see, feel, and touch. Right. Well, right now in the trades, like welding, bricklaying, stuff like that, there's a shortage of people that are out there, and they're very geographically incompatible. You can't ship these things overseas, and the wages are starting to go up. And for some of the parents out there, they get stuck in the mindset that my kid's got to go to college. They're going through misery because school's difficult. There's lots of negativity. There's self-esteem issues where if you put them in a trade where they can thrive, not only can they thrive, but they can make a lot of money and be in demand for a long period of time. If you can begin to think of that rewriting that narrative makes some sense. But parents, I'm going to tell you, as a parent, you're going to have a hard time doing that. It's like that anxiety, blah, blah. I've got to let go and trust that this is going to happen. And I want you to know, if you take anything from this today, is that if you feel that anxiety and you feel that frustration, you're supposed to. That's what is involved in rewriting the narrative. It is anxiety ridden, but Bob's got a whole bunch of people that are going to be coming on and talking about this, and you listen to them and they all got there for the most part the same way, and you can too. You just have to put faith in that process, because you've got to let go of that belief system, the way your mind is set up, that old narrative, and rewrite the new one that might seem foreign or uncomfortable. But if you look for the evidence, there's lots of successful people out there who've been able to do it.
Yeah, there's a whole list of them, from musicians to entrepreneurs and whatnot. I mean, you can look as far back as Thomas Edison and maybe even Beethoven, to see some of the behaviors. I mean, they didn't diagnose it at that time, right? But
Yep.
To see the behaviors that were obviously there, that are similar to and match ADHD or even autism behaviors, and the brilliance that they created over their lifetime, and that we've still enjoy today.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Absolutely.
fantastic. So changing the narrative around ADHD is important, and we've said this a ton of times, and we'll continue saying it to drive home the point. But it's important for a couple of reasons. As Dr. Barkley said, if you've seen his interview, he talks about the mortality rate of ADHD and how ADHD has a higher mortality rate than diabetes and heart disease and other diseases out there. You're probably going to live 13 years longer on average if you have ADHD. And the reason why is because most people don't know they have it. They don't manage it, and they choose lifestyles and make choices that shorten their life. The good news is that it is the most manageable of the diseases out there.
So I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is another example.
Mm-hmm.
You're sharing the kind of surface level, but there's in that study that came out with a life expectancy, there's 14 variables that they measured that go into the mortality of it. I think there's 5 of them you can't do anything about. It's like your sex, your level of intelligence, or something like that. But the 9 that's left, it's like Western diet, substance abuse. What they all have in common is the need to self-regulate. What Dr. Barkley's trying to, because all of those, like the weight issues, like because of the self-regulation, you're eating more of the Western high-carb diet, which leads to earlier onsets of diabetes, earlier incidents of cardiac events, more severe cardiac events, etc. But if you listen to all those, what they all have in common is self-regulation.
Yeah.
What he's trying to do is change the narrative around it publicly, because substance abuse and food has been being dealt with on a let's limit calorie intake, or let's limit, those types of things, as opposed to self-regulation is the second tier variable that has everything to do with it. And he's trying to cast it as a public health issue, not an individual health issue. So he's trying to rewrite the way the government and everybody looks at ADHD, because with this finding, 13 to 20 year life expectancy is profound. And so he's, again, trying to change the mindset of even how we deal with this. We don't need to be dealing with weight loss stuff. We need to go to the core, help those with ADHD manage self-regulation, because it's the one factor that's key to the 9 variables that you can do something about.
Yeah, fantastic. And on that point, it is so much more effective or just as effective to have this motivation be to access this awesome side of yourself, as it is to move away from the mortality rates. So understanding both can be both the carrot and the stick approach to motivating yourself, and motivating yourself for your own self if you have ADHD, motivating yourself to make sure that your children get the management that they deserve as well. And the solutions are out there. There are tons of solutions, which we cover many of them in this toolbox. But that's that's the purpose of changing this narrative, so people aren't we take away the stigma, and people aren't ashamed of having ADHD. Instead, they wear it on their t-shirts and say, hey, I'm proud of this, and I can do things you can't. Yeah, I have this brilliant access to this creativity.
I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs, they're so into work. The problem is life balance going home.
Right.
And like they're out working. I mean, everybody comes in the next day after the entrepreneur been there till midnight, and they're like overwhelmed because he worked and there's a ton of work, so everybody else kind of can't keep up. It's very positive in that environment. Again, it can create some life balance issues, but that's what ADHD is really about. Really kind of bringing balance into what you're doing. But it all starts with the awareness of what's going on and the process you're going through to do that, which is what we're hoping people will understand today.
Fantastic. Well, that's fantastic. Great kickoff to this new version of the toolbox. This is our second run of the ADHD Toolbox, the whole list of new speakers with new content, and so parents and teachers can go deeper. So thanks, Jeff, for kicking this off and setting the tone for where we're going with this. Anything that you'd like to add before we
Nothing other than this is point A, this is point B. As you go through to rewrite this narrative, I'm just saying it's normal if you're feeling some anxiety and some difficulty. Embrace it. It's a part of the process. It actually helps you understand that you're on the journey, which is what Bob is here to do, is help you make that leap, because when you do, it changes the world. You can all of a sudden see things that work that didn't make any sense before once you rewrite that narrative. And so, Bob, I'm kind of grateful that you're doing this for the community to try to be, like a thought leader in this process to kind of help people jumpstart this. And I'm just grateful that you gave me the opportunity to kind of help let people be aware that this is the natural process you go to. Don't fight it, embrace it, be as comfortable with it as you can, because the more you are, the quicker you'll get there, and we'll be accomplished what Bob's trying to really help us all do.
Right. Well, what we're all trying to do is just to make our lives better, our children's lives better, and make things easier. And I see kids out there getting bullied and things like that because of their ADHD. And if we can do something to get rid of that, I'm all about it. So thank you for being part of this. How do we find you if people want to find you and find your podcast, et cetera? Where do we go?
Digcoaching.com is my website. When you're there, we have a drop down for blogs, video blogs, and podcast blogs. When you click on that, it'll take you to episodes of our radio show and our YouTube channel. If you need to, you can call me at 762-ADD-ADHD. It's as simple as that, 762-ADD-ADHD. Not that difficult to remember.
Fantastic. And we'll put your email down below, as well as your phone number and a link to your website. People can follow you. And thank you again so much for being on this and kicking off, setting the tone for this ADHD Toolbox.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you for watching this edition. And we will see you guys on the next edition of the ADHD Toolbox.